So first of all, I want to say shalom and welcome to this special Talking Memory commemoration event, remembering the Jewish deportation to Mauritius, 76 years after liberation. My name is Medine Shachar, and I work at the Ghetto Fighters House as a guide and an educator. I want to welcome our global audience from all over the world. As you can see in the chat box, we are from all over the world, including friends and colleagues from Holocaust museums, institutions, and centers, academics and students from universities, historians, and our many friends who attend our Talking Memory series. A special welcome, as always, to the survivors and their families that are with us today, including those who are personally connected to the story of the Jewish refugees involved in the escape from Europe during the Holocaust and the deportation to Mauritius. We want to thank everyone for their support and interest in our programs. I missed everyone, it's been a month. Today's program is in partnership with our friends at the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, the Beau Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center on Mauritius, and the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in South Africa. We are honored to work together to make this event possible. But before we start, there's always housekeeping notes. First of all, some people are already asking in the chat. Yes, our program will be recorded, and I will put a link to our YouTube channel in the chat box. The video should be ready within a few days. We have put all participants on mute in order to avoid unwanted noise during the program, but you can use the chat box to communicate, to send questions, and if at the end of the program, if there's time, we may be able to ask one or two questions. I also would like to invite you to the next Talking Memory program on August 29th in 2 weeks. It's our last program in the summer, and then we're taking a break. The name of the program is First They Killed My Father, a daughter of Cambodia remembers, a conversation with Lung Ung. This event is in partnership with Classrooms Without Borders and South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation. A link for this program will be put in the chat box as well. We will once again be on hiatus for the Jewish high holidays during September, but we'll return in October with a special 3-part series on the Jewish community in the Netherlands during the Holocaust. We'll post details about these 3 programs in the near future. And now on behalf of Eagle Cohen, the CEO of the Ghetto Fighters House, who could not be with us today or this evening, I would like to thank our partners for organizing this program commemorating the Jewish detainees on Mauritius. A special thanks to Tally Nates and Owen Griffiths, who represent our partners for today's event, Dr. Roni Mikel Arieli, a leading scholar about the Jewish detainees on Mauritius, Nat Bratman-Ilalel, the director of the Ghetto Fighters House Archives, Isaac Adler, a survivor who was detained as a child on Mauritius, the author Ariella Talmi, and Ann Harris, president of the African Jewish Congress, for contributing your knowledge and experiences in today's commemoration event. The Ghetto Fighters House in Israel, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center in South Africa, and the Beau Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center in Mauritius are historically connected to and work to remember and commemorate the events leading up to the detention of European Jewish refugees on Mauritius during the Holocaust, as well as the life stories of those who were detained there for 5 years. Through our archives, collected testimonies, exhibitions, and memorial events such as this one, we are preserving and bringing to the forefront the memory of this difficult and less known story of Jewish refugees who escaped Nazi persecution in Europe with the hopes of reaching the shores of Eretz Israel, only to find themselves captured, transported, and imprisoned by British authorities on the island of Mauritius. As well, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation for their continued partnership in preserving this memory. And now, I would like to invite Tally Nates, founder and director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, and then Owen Griffiths, president of the Beau Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center, to give their opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Medine. Thank you so much to the director of the Ghetto Fighters House, Igal Cohen. And it is wonderful to partner again with the Ghetto Fighters House and again with the Beau Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center and with the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. And indeed, thank you to everyone for joining from all around the world to this marking of the 76th anniversary of the liberation of the detainees from the Bassin camp in Mauritius. And you'll hear so much about this history in tonight's event. I'm very moved to see so many ex-detainees and their families here, and of course, many friends from the African Jewish Congress, from the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. I see our friends, the survivors, Eli Gotz, I saw you, I saw many other Holocaust survivors here with us, many dignitaries, rabbis, and colleagues, academics. It's just very, very moving to see all of us joining together, second year in a row on Zoom, actually, to mark this day. This episode, these 5 years in the Bassin prison and camp, is the closest the Holocaust came to South Africa. South Africa was fighting with the Allies. It was fighting in North Africa, it was fighting in Italy, it was fighting in East Africa. But the Holocaust came closest through the 1,580 detainees that spent the war from December 1940 until August 1945 in Mauritius. Mauritius is only 3.5 to 4 hours flight away from here. This story is actually part of the permanent exhibition of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, the only second place in the world, a part of Mauritius, that tells fully this story. So it is very important for us to partner and to work closely together with the Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center, actually since its inception. In the past year, since August of 2020 and the 75th anniversary for the liberation from Mauritius, we were involved with many, many projects. I think the highlight was the creation of the center, the Memorial Center's website. I'm going to post it in the chat. And I really encourage all of you to go to this new website, launched only in December, that tells such a lot of information about the history. It has so many layers in English and in French, and we add all the time new information to this website. And I would love you all to also join our Facebook group. And the Facebook group is growing, and it is important for us to have all the ex-detainees and their families coming and joining this Facebook group too. Many other projects are in the making. One of them was that we were hoping to meet in Mauritius in December of this year. All ex-detainees, their families, people that are interested. And indeed, Mauritius is opening slowly to the public on the 1st of October, but as the pandemic is still with us, we decided to actually postpone the gathering to hopefully 2022. So please visit the Facebook page, visit the website, and you will find out more details about it. And hopefully, when the pandemic is far behind us and we are all healthy, we can all meet in Mauritius, visit the Bassin Memorial and Information Center, that and the cemetery that tells the story of this relatively unknown episode that I feel that through our continuous work and through the amazing work of Dr. Ronnie Michel-Arieli is becoming more known. It gives us great joy to now work so closely with the Ghetto Fighters House that houses the largest archive of this history in the world. And it makes so much sense that these three institutions are actually now working together. And I look very much forward to continue to work together for many, many more years to come. Finally, just to say that I'm looking forward to learn even more today from the archive of the Ghetto Fighters House through Anat Bratman, and from ex-detainee Yitzhak Adler that is going to share with us some of his childhood memories and drawings, and of course from a descendant of this story, author Erela Talmi, whose grandmother was a detainee on the island. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a very meaningful event.
Thank you very much, Tali, for your words and for all the information that we have now. I'm so excited that we have this opportunity to learn more and more and more about what happened on Mauritius. And now I would like to invite Owen Griffiths, the president of the Beau Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center, to say a few remarks.
Owen, you are muted.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madine. Greetings to all attendees, and especially to ex-detainees and their families, of course. As president of the Jewish community in Mauritius, and as chair of the Beau Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar, which, as we know, is being held in conjunction with the Ghetto Fighters House, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center. The webinar is for the commemoration of the 76th anniversary of the liberation of the Jewish Aliyah Bet detainees from Beau Bassin prison in Mauritius. The commemoration today is about this globally little-known story of the deportation to Mauritius of some 1,600 Jewish refugees who, having successfully fled Nazi-occupied Europe and arrived in Palestine, were subsequently imprisoned at the Atlit camp near Haifa and then deported and imprisoned in Mauritius. Their crime, being Jews and having illegally returned to the ancient and new Jewish homeland in Palestine. Of the approximately 1,600 detainees deported to Mauritius, some 126 tragically died here. Those remaining in Mauritius at the end of the war in Europe at least, were allowed to finally go home after 4 years and 7 months in detention. On the 11th of August 1945, 1,307 detainees boarded the Franconia in Port Louis Harbour for the 2-week voyage to Haifa. Furthermore, over 60 children were born in the prison. One of them, my good friend Tali Regev, is today the Honorary Consul of Mauritius in Israel and is attending this webinar this evening. Many times I'm asked what remains of this tragic episode in Mauritius. The answer is actually quite a lot. Not only is there the Jewish cemetery that Tali referred to, which is carefully maintained by the Island Hebrew congregation with the help and support of the African Jewish Congress, but we have the small museum, which is with a very professional information center next to the cemetery telling their story. And on that note, I would like to end here. But before doing so, I want to thank those who made today's virtual function possible. Dr. Ronnie Michele Arieli from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Tali Nates from the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, and the Ghetto Fighters House in Israel, and also our friends from the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. To all of you, a hearty thanks, Toda Rabbah, and a great seminar.
Unmute. Okay, now I'm unmuted. Sorry. I want to thank you, both Tali and Owen, for your opening remarks. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Roni Michele Arieli, who will be facilitating the next part of the program today. Roni is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Abraham Hartman Institute of Contemporary Jewry at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, with the support of the Foundation pour le Mémoire de la Shoah, where she is working on her research project, Jewish Deportees in Mauritius, 1940 to 1945, a history from the margins. And Roni, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning to you all, wherever you are. And thank you all for joining us. It's really, I'm very moved to see so many familiar faces from all over the world. As Tali mentioned, a year ago, we met on Zoom to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Beau Bassin camp. And while the plan was to convene in Mauritius, the COVID-19 outbreak changed our plans, and it keeps on changing it. The advantage was that people from all over the world were now able to join us and to learn more about this understudied episode in our history. When we met again last December to mark the 80th anniversary of the deportation, we already knew that an online event would not only enable many people from all over the world to join in, we realized that the Zoom could serve as a platform for a reunion for all of the ex-detainees and their relatives. And alongside the semi-academic conference, we held an online reunion with more than 80 ex-detainees and the second and third generation of the detainees. And we had more than 10 people who were actually born in Mauritius, a handful who were deported as children, and many, many children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of ex-detainees, all with many memories to tell and stories to share. For me, as an outside viewer, it felt like a community that comes back into being. And I am so moved to see so many of these community members with us today. I would like to introduce to you our first speaker, Anat Bartman-Elalel, which is working at the Ghetto Fighters Archives as a senior archivist since 2007. And of course, she's the director of the archives for the last 10 years. Anat is the leader of the accessibility and content digitalization project, which contributes to the exposure and accessibility of the archive through technological tools and means. And you don't realize how important it is. It's not only that the collection, the Mauritius Exile collection that Anat will introduce to you all today, is the largest collection available on the subject. It is also available online, and which is remarkable, especially at times of COVID, when we are not really able to travel to conduct research. So without further ado, I would like to us all to welcome Anat, and Anat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ronnie. I will share my screen in a minute. Okay. So is it okay? Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Maydeen and Tali. I'm glad to be here this evening. And I will tell the story of the collection of Mauritius in the Ghetto Fighters House archive. So the collection was donated on 2008 by the Association of Jews from Mauritius. Nurit Kitron, as the head of the association, brought the items to the archive back then in 2008. But actually some items were on our holdings before that, and some were donated afterwards. As you can see, for example, the album on the screen, which was donated exactly a year ago during the pandemic, by Judith Arnon and Nurit Biron. It is made out of recycled paper, as you probably can see. And it depicts the journey on the Atlantic until the ship arrived to Haifa, to Atlit. And now I will, just a minute, okay. So I was the lucky one to take care of the collection when it arrived. And we decided to divide it into a couple of categories. I must say that I was the one to sort, to catalog, to touch, and to read these stories of this almost unknown affair in Israel. And it was, you know, those stories touch my heart. And maybe I will share some or one or two of these stories with you today. So the first category, you can see it's on the left, the 3D artifacts, as this clown over here, which was donated by Kitty Drill. It was made in Mauritius by her mother, Ethel, to her birthday, to Kitty's birthday. This is one category. You can see a page from an album on the right corner of the screen. This album was illustrated and designed by Gustel Spazier and was belongs to Erwin and Lily Fuchs. We hold more than 250 photographs depicting the journey to Eretz Israel, the journey to Mauritius, and of course, many photos from the long, almost 5 years in Mauritius. You can see on the right the third category, which contains memoirs and letters and diaries and all other kinds of certificates. This is the diary of Erwin Kovac, written in German and in Hebrew. Erwin Kovac was one of the leaders of the Czechoslovakian group. He was on the group that left, the Czechoslovakian group that left Mauritius and joined the British Army in 1942. And of course, you can see here one of the artworks that are in that collection, this especially artworks made by Fritz Händel and Beda Meyer, but also other artists who draw in Mauritius. Here you can see a sketch by Fritz Händel depicting the exact moment of those Czechoslovakian men who left the island to join the British Army. In 2009, we hosted a beautiful exhibition, temporary exhibition. You can see the catalog on the right, written by Elena Makarova, the curator of the exhibition Boarding Pass to Paradise, Kartis Aliyah LeGan Eden. The exhibition focused mainly on the artworks of Beda Meyer and Fritz Händel, but also again depicted the journey, the stay in Mauritius, the life in Mauritius, etc. I know it's difficult to see and to understand what are you actually seeing right now, but we do have a permanent display concerning Mauritius. This photo was taken at this core hall. It's very difficult to take photos over there because the room is dark, but I hope you can see on the left a black glass wall with some blue dots. If you touch the blue dots, the light goes on in some of the drawers. There are actually 65 drawers on 2 black walls in that exhibition. And one of the drawers is dedicated to the Mauritius detainees. As you can see here, this dress belonged to Eva Friedberg, and it was made by her mother Dorothea. She made it out of bandage fabric while she was hospitalized in Mauritius, and she made it for her daughter who participated in Hanukkah celebrations. So she wanted her to have a nice white dress. So this drawer is a permanent display, and everyone can see and read about the Mauritius detainees. And now I would like to focus on one specific story. You can see on the left Heinz Lindman. He was born in 1907 to a Jewish family. He married Alfreda, who was born to a Christian family, and they had two sons. Hans was born in 1932, and his brother Georg was born a year later. They lived in Berlin, but after the Nazi rise to power, the family had to leave Berlin and moved to Danzig. Heinz had to close his pharmacy. He was a pharmacist. He had to close it. And on 1940, he decided to try to immigrate to Eretz Israel. As you can understand, he was on the Atlantic and finally was deported to Mauritius. Alfreda sent her two sons to her mother in Kranz, near the Baltic Sea. She stayed in Danzig, and she had some correspondence with her husband, as you can see on the right. In the middle, you can see Heinz's suitcase, which he took with him to Mauritius. In Kranz, the boys, well, everyone in town knew they were Jewish, but did not inform on, because some respect the people in the town had to their grandfather, who was a teacher in that town. And Hans, the oldest, even in some time was actually a courier for the Nazi party in Kranz, delivered some mail from one place to another. And finally, when the war was over, the mother and her sons reunited, but the time was very tough because they were German and the area was occupied by the Soviets, so time were very difficult. And finally, they succeeded to arrive to Bergen-Belsen DP camp. And that time, Heinz was already in Eretz Israel, trying to bring his family to Israel. He succeeded to bring his wife, Alfreda, but did not succeed to bring his sons because they were Jewish. You can see them on the left. Georg, the youngest, is on the top, and down there is Hans, Klaus. And the man in the middle is Aaron Burstein and Shaliach, an emissary from Israel that went to Germany and actually was involved in bringing those young boys to Israel, helping them to convert to Judaism, and made all the necessary arrangements and documents, and at the end succeeded to bring them to Israel. You can see on the right the letter Alfreda wrote him while she was already in Israel then, and the boys were on their way to Israel. By the way, Hans changed his name in Israel to Dan, and Georg changed his name to Aharon after Aharon Borstein, who helped them to come to Israel. Unfortunately, Heinz passed away on 1950, a few months after the boys came to Israel. Dan and Aharon lived in Kibbutz Kabri, not far away from Lochamei Getaot. They brought their mother, Alfreda, to the kibbutz. She died in the kibbutz. I received the collection from Dan on 2009. He passed away in 2015. And maybe another story, if I still have some time. This is the story of Aryeh Leopold Keller. We received 2 diaries on 2019. Aryeh Keller was about 13 years old when he arrived to Mauritius with his parents, Benjamin and Henrietta. He was the only son of his parents. And actually we received two diaries. The first one was written in Mauritius. And it described the journey, the ships, how they looked, as I will read in a minute, the life in Mauritius. It is decorated with maps and sketches and so on. A beautiful diary written in German. Maybe I will read a few words from the diary. Our ships actually did anchor in the port. It was sorry, something is disturbing me here. Okay, it was an uncomfortable situation, the waiting, promises that were not kept. We stopped believing when they promised us something or when they spoke of a schedule. The ships were not pretty sight either. Relatively to Pencho, they were beautiful, but they were really old and miserable. Coffins named Atlantic, Pacific, and Milus. Their look was a complete contradiction to these bombastic names. These ships were all from Greece and they were intended to carry a mixed cargo of humans and commodities. The beds were probably only wooden berths that you could lie on, but not wide enough for you to move. Flapping about it all were flags that resemble a sports club streamer, the flag of Panama, our imaginary homeland. And this is the second diary. On the left, you can see Aryeh Keller after he arrived to Israel. And actually, 3 years after his arrival, he joined the new Israeli army. And during the War of Independence of Israel in 1948, he was participating in fighting not far away from Netanya. On June 11, he was injured, and 3 days later, he passed away. He is buried in Kfar Saba. You can see his diary from the fighting. Actually, he is writing this diary during the fightings. After his parents' death, the diary was received by neighbors of his parents and Holocaust survivors, the family chief, and then it was, moved, held by another family member, and finally received in the Ghetto Fighters House archive on 2019. I would like to emphasize that our main efforts in the archive for the last 20 and even more years is to make our collections accessible, to digitize them, to write down the stories behind those items, to upload them to the internet, to make contact with researchers and let them know about our holdings, to contact journalists and tell them about our unique items as well, and to make them accessible so everyone can access them and could see them. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Anat. And as one of the researchers, I can testify to the professionality of this archive, and actually call all of you who has who still have, archival material of your own, and looking for, a place to preserve it, to turn to Anat, because I really do believe that this collection is amazing, and I would like us to, before we will turn to the second speaker, I would like to show you all a short video prepared by the Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center to commemorate the children who died in Mauritius during the detention period. So we will have a very short 2 minutes video, and then we will continue.
Just a few moments and I'll begin.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Kayla, j'ai 9 ans et j'ai dessiné ce dessin pour Beau qui est mort à l'âge de 8 ans. Et j'ai eu vraiment beaucoup de chagrin pour lui quand j'ai appris qu'il était mort à l'âge de 8 ans. Et on m'a raconté qu'il avait 2 frères, que le plus grand malheureusement n'était pas avec eux à Maurice. Et sur ma pierre, j'ai dessiné les 3 frères dans un cœur, même si la guerre les a séparés. Mais pour moi, au fond de mon cœur, je sais que l'amour fraternel ne meurt jamais. Et j'ai mis des tulipes parce que je sais là où vit sa famille, c'est la fleur nationale du pays. Et je souhaite qu'un jour que sa famille puisse venir à Maurice pour se recueillir sur sa tombe. Et voilà ma deuxième pierre. Celle-là, c'est pour Baby George qui est mort à l'âge de 2 mois. Et j'ai eu vraiment beaucoup de chagrin pour lui parce qu'il était mort à 2 mois. Et sur ma pierre, j'ai dessiné Baby George qui dort dans l'air pâturage. Et derrière, j'ai dessiné mon beau paysage avec le soleil et les nuages. Et j'ai mis des oiseaux. Pour moi, les oiseaux, c'est comme si j'ai envoyé un message au monde entier pour savoir si quelqu'un sait si Baby George reste de la famille. Parce que chaque fois que je pars au cimetière le dimanche, je me dis, quand je regarde sa tombe, je me dis qu'est-ce qu'il serait devenu s'il n'était pas mort à l'âge de 2 mois.
Okay, so our next speaker is Isaac Adler, and it is a great pleasure for me to introduce him to you all in this forum. Isaac's father, Joseph Adler's memoir, was the first ego document I read going through the collection at the Ghetto Fighters House archive. Isaac was born in 1940 in Bratislava, and his family managed to escape Nazi Europe. Upon their arrival to Haifa, along with other refugees, their entry was denied and were exiled to Mauritius, where they were imprisoned for 5 years. Upon their return to Palestine, the family lived in Negev Kibbutz for 4 years and left in 1949 to Lod. Later in life, he owned an Israeli fashion company, and presently he and his wife, Marlies, live in Denver, Colorado. Isaac will present to us today his new illustrated book, Young Captain on a Broken Boat, expressing his childhood memories. Isaac, you can unmute yourself and I will share the screen. Okay. Isaac, the floor is yours. You can start.
Hi, I'm talking to you from Denver, Colorado. We have had bad weather, not bad weather, but bad air coming from the fires of Florida, of California, and that affects my voice. I have quite a few allergies, and so excuse me. Young Captain on a Broken Boat is a story of the young boy I want you to meet today. It's the book, it's not so much about me, the man who I am today, but about the boy who lived in Mauritius many years ago. His memories are the ones I wrote the book about. And I wrote it only recently, but the memories followed me. The boy's memories followed me for many, many years until finally I couldn't stand it anymore and started writing it. The young boy was standing on a broken boat looking for a big ship. And I'm going to read the story that I wrote, a short story. Years ago, a young Jewish boy stood on a broken boat, half buried in the sand, holding a piece of bamboo he had made into a toy telescope. The boy was scanning the horizon, looking for the large ship that would take him and his parents back to Eretz Israel. In 1940, the boy and his parents and 1,580 other Jewish refugees were deported to the remote island of Mauritius, located in the heart of the Indian Ocean, after they were denied entry to then British-controlled Palestine. I was that boy. Now, the term Eretz Israel was mentioned many times during the detention in Mauritius. I had no idea what Eretz Israel meant and what it was, but to me, it was the distant land, the magic land that would give me and my parents freedom. And that's why I stood on this broken boat that was actually my only toy on the island. I had no toys. And when we were allowed to go to the seaside, after many people start dying, the management of the prison decided that in order to keep us alive, we should be a little bit away from the island for a week. So in a place where there are no mosquitoes. So they erected tents in a coconut plantation, and we spent time there. And then I discovered the broken boat. I was never told that I was Jewish. My parents wanted to keep me away from this, from the reasons we were there. They'd never explained to me why we were deported and how it came to be that we were there. But then I found myself on the island, witnessing terrible things that are not something that a 4-year-old boy should see. And I wrote, I made the list of those things a little bit. So let me bring it up. a place, 4 years or 5 years in the prison, it's not a place where a boy should grow, should be brought up. Seeing a man being revived by fellow prisoners after he hung himself is not a place where a boy should see. It's not something a boy should see. A boy should play with other children, not play with his father in his prison cell. A boy should have toys to play with and not stand on a broken boat looking for a ship that will take them away from prison. And that was my childhood. And this is the reason I wrote this book. Later, when the book was almost finished, I was thinking about it, that here I am. I wrote a book about a Jewish boy in a prison. And then I realized that I'm not the only boy who is spending time in dire conditions in a prison camp. There must be millions of children who are in similar conditions and different circumstances. And I decided to dedicate the book to those children who, through no fault of their own, lost their lives, lost their freedom, and their childhood. And that is what my book is dedicated to. I want to be the voice for those children. And hopefully it will become known that children imprisonment is not just a Jewish thing. It's an international thing. So this is why I think this Jewish boy standing on a broken boat, the young captain on a broken boat, could be a voice of many children in the world. I would like to read to you the arrival of the big ship that took us out of Mauritius. And I'm reading it out of the book. Time had come to leave our prison, we were told. Buses took us all to the Port Louis, where we all embarked on white cargo launches pulled by very powerful small motorboats. Before long, we were out of the port onto the wide open sea. The launches were very crowded, overly crowded, but no one cared. It felt good to be away from the island, away from prison. The large ship towered out of the sea like a giant, strong fortress. I was happy. This was the big ship I was searching for on the far horizon with my toy bamboo telescope while standing on the broken boat. It took a long time. It was not a dream. It was really here, ready to carry us back to freedom, finally. And I'm following here. Bye-bye Mauritius, bye-bye prison. I was standing by my mother on the back deck of the ship, watching the island on the horizon become smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared. We were now on our way to Eretz Israel, our land. No more women's barracks, no more beds covered with mosquito tents, no more walls and guards. Mother told me I was a baby when I had first arrived. I was now a 5-year-old boy, finally becoming free. It felt so good. I asked Mother if Father would be waiting for us in Eretz Israel. She said, yes, he will. I was so happy. So that was a story. I'm here today. I'm not among those who perished and got buried on the island. And I'm here to tell the story. Hopefully, the book will be read by millions and realize that this story happened. I'm witnessing a historic event, not just my little private story. It is a story of a Jewish nation, of Jews who were exiled by Britain, not just by, the Jews were not allowed to come to their own land. And there was no reason for that. We could have stayed in Palestine, Eretz Israel, but no, they decided to send us to the island of Mauritius. And that's why I'm writing the story.
Isaac, thank you so much for this really moving book and for sharing it with us. I would like to ask now to turn to our last speaker, because we are running short with time. Erela Talmi, born in Kibbutz Afikim, Erela is a graduate of the Juilliard School in New York, where she majored in flute playing. Over 40 years, she performed and recorded music widely around the world. Since her retirement, she swept the music notes with the written word, published 4 rhymed children's books in a series, Melody Kids, and her first novel, Out of Reach, which focuses on the Jewish deportation to Mauritius, saw the light of day in February 2021. Erela, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad I finally get to speak to you and tell about my story. And I would like to start with mentioning that I heard the word Mauritius when I was 3 years old, maybe 2 months short of 3. It was exactly on 26th of August when my parents came back from Haifa, and they brought with them a grandmother. My grandmother arrived from Mauritius, and this is when I heard the name. Of course, I couldn't pronounce it. We say it in Hebrew, Mauritius, as it is pronounced also in German. Our grandmother came to the kibbutz. She received a little flat of just 1 room and a kitchen. And it became the center of our family, which meant that she became sort of my second mother. I spent a lot of time with my grandma, who was a survivor from Europe and from Mauritius. But she never told us anything about it. She was such a loving and caring woman, and she didn't want to talk about herself, about her past, what she went through. I knew that she's actually from Vienna. I couldn't understand how come, if my parents came in time directly from Vienna, why couldn't she? And how come she was sent so far? This is what they told me, and stayed in Mauritius. So, of course, there were questions, there were no answers, and we continued our life without knowing a thing or two or anything about the 2 mysteries, Mauritius and the exile of my own grandmother to that place. Time passed by very quickly. I was busy studying, and then I was busy playing the flute, and then serving in the army, and starting a career and meeting my husband, getting married, raising a family, performing. And for years, this story didn't come back to me. It was only actually only when I decided to write my first novel. And when I decided, I knew immediately that it's going to be about this mystery, about this unknown story of the exile to Mauritius, excuse me. Of course, not knowing anything gave me just a few choices. One of them was, of course, to start meeting people. The other one was to search on the internet, in the different archives, and there are many, as you now see and hear. And I chose the second because I didn't want people to tell me what happened to them. I wanted to tell my own story. I wanted to search the history of this affair, this event, and create my own story on the basis of these historical events. So, of course, I went to the Ghetto Fighters House. I went to Yad Vashem, to Acre prison, Akko, as we say in Hebrew, and to Atlit, of course, to Atlit, where they detained for the first time between fences, which was a big shock for everyone. Not as big as it would be later in Mauritius. So I learned and I searched and I digged in, also a lot online. And one of the books that I found very helpful was a wonderful source, The Mauritian Shekel by Geneviève Pitot. I'm sure many of you know this book, or at least a few of you read it. It's sort of a document. Geneviève Pitot was 10 years old when she went to school and took drawing class with Anna Frank. Not the Anna Frank that we know, but Anna Frank was one of the artists together with Fritz and Beda in Mauritius. And she was invited to teach drawing for children in a local school. Geneviève Pitot took classes, I think only 1 year, when she was 10 years old. Many years later, when she already an adult, actually she, like me, she was very interested to know what happened there. What happened to Anna? Why was she there? Why she was detained with all the inmates that were around her, close to 1,600 men, women, and children. So she started the big research of us all. And the material that she found served me, and I'm sure them others, also others, to create the center story of Mauritius, starting from the fleet from Europe, continuing on the boats, arriving in a poor condition, actually being towed by the British from Cyprus to Haifa, and then the whole story with Patria, which I'm not going to tell now, it is written in the book, and then detained in Atlit for almost 2 weeks. Of course, there was great hope that they will be released, and this was what they were praying for, but it didn't happen. The British were at that point very determined to show those Jews who are going against our instructions and are coming more and more illegally. So we will show them, and once these people will be detained, others will not dare doing it. The detention that ended in Atlit continued very brutally in Mauritius. Those close to 1,600 Jews were taken by two Dutch boats, quite nice, not as small and falling apart as those they had when they left Europe. And they were taken to a place at first they didn't know where. On the way there, they discovered it's going to be as far as possible to the island of Mauritius, that beautiful island. They arrived there, and again, something happened there that struck them tremendously. On that fantastically beautiful island, they were put in prison directly. The men were thrown to a jail, an old French fortification, and the women found themselves in a camp surrounded by barbed wire fences built especially for them on a swamp soil, actually full with malaria mosquitoes. So of course you can imagine the sicknesses that they had there, malaria, typhoid, and other we won't mention them here, it's all in the book. So there was a huge shock. At first, they were hoping from 1 week to the other that this is going to be, for 2 weeks, like an athlete, maybe 2 months, maybe after 2 years, that was just going on. And it took almost 5 years, and with a lot that went in between. And again, I don't want to spoil the story for those who will finally get to read it. Right now only in Hebrew, but we hope it will be translated to English. But the suffering was quite big, especially in view of what was happening in Europe. They knew exactly what is going on in the war in Europe and what is happening to their brothers and sisters, and the fact that they were sort of surrounded by protection, not able to get out of it, but really protected while their fellow Jews are being killed. And also those who left the camp to join the British Army, some of them were killed in the war. All of that added a huge load on their shoulders and on their horrible feeling. What are we doing here? There is a huge war over there. The British are fighting with great success against the same enemies. We are sharing the same enemies. Why are we here? We didn't do anything wrong. And that was something they fought over and over again. And they insisted that they should be given a trial because we haven't done anything wrong. But the British were quite stubborn and insensitive, and it went on and on until the very last months when they finally got the message that they will be released. When ships will be able to arrive to Mauritius, and that was a big issue because during the war, it was hard to get through the Indian Ocean and the Suez Canal. So the end was that after they were finally told that they will be released and go home, they had to wait 3 more months until finally the war in Europe was over. when they were released and when the big ship Franconia arrived in Mauritius and took them all back to their homeland. Any question?
Thank you so much, Arela. And I think that both Arela and Isaac touched a very important issue. The issue of refugees was always considered somewhat marginal in the history of the Holocaust. And in recent years, however, research on refugees from the German Reich territories has become more concerned with the peripheries of the global South. A growing interest in case studies of refugees in British overseas territories it's particularly pronounced in the field of exile studies, and some focusing on places of refuge, while others place of forced internment. And indeed, the deportation to Mauritius is yet another such case study. However, like any historical event, it is unique in its particularities. In today's lectures, we got a glimpse into some of these particularities and received a living proof that the memory and history of this episode is no longer a neglected episode. We have more than 5 novels focusing on the deportation to Mauritius, and I know a lot of people wrote to me privately and about other novels, and you can find on the website a list of books that were published on the matter. So we have more than 5 novels, 2 documentaries, several archival collections, a memorial and information center in Mauritius, and some small exhibits, as we all heard, in Johannesburg and in Israel at the Ghetto Fighters House. And the deportation is being taught in high schools in Mauritius. And as from this fall, it will also be taught at the Ben Gurion University in Israel. It seems that by the time that my book will be published, Food, 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 I will need to change its title, as it is no longer a history from the margins. Thank you.
May I say just one more thing? Am I heard?
You're heard, but I'm not sure who is speaking.
Arela.
Yes, sorry, Arela.
As I mentioned before, we've been asked over and over again, when and how will this book be translated to English and published in English? So I throw the gloves to you all of you who are here today and others, to try and help us find a publication. We have a translator, but we need a publication and a good house will want to host this book in English. Thank you, and thank you for being here.
So it is my pleasure to thank all these panelists, wonderful panelists led by Dr. Ronnie Michel-Arieli. So I would like to thank Anat Bratman for sharing with us the secrets of the archive. It was wonderful to hear from Yitzhak Adler, that the child that was in Mauritius, and about his book, and from the grandchild, Arela Talmi, about her book. And before we end, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you, to say the final address to Anne Harris. Anne Harris is the president of the African Jewish Congress. She's also the wife of our South African beloved late Chief Rabbi, Rabbi Cyril Harris, that is known to all of us as Mandela's rabbi. So Anne, the floor is yours.
And you're muted.
You are still muted.
Yaron, can you unmute her perhaps?
Just a second. Anne, can you unmute yourself? I just, okay.
Have you got it now?
Yeah, start from the beginning.
Yes, I haven't really begun. Okay. Honored guests from all over the world, I bring greetings to you all from the members of the African Jewish Congress, which keeps the flag of Jewish identity flying in all the countries, about 10 of them altogether, in sub-Saharan Africa. And we are very honored that Mauritius is one of our countries, and we are very proud to be able to participate in this commemoration and to have been of great assistance in the preparation of the Beau Bassin Center some 5 or 6 years ago. I just want to say that to Owen Griffiths, all your colleagues in the AJC, Owen, send you their admiration for the work that you do and have done for the Island Hebrew Congregation and the Beau Bassin Center. Almost everything that has been done in Mauritius has been due to you. May I also pass on to you best wishes from Rabbi Moshe Silverhaft, who is our director of the African Jewish Congress. He's in Israel at the moment, assisting at the birth of a grandchild. So we did let him off to this week. That was, he could have a little holiday. My good friend and colleague, Tally Nates, asked me to add my reflections on tonight's proceedings. And as I think of the great story, I am struck by the huge importance of the concept of leadership. Without the strength of the leaders who emerged during those years, those 5 years, they would never have passed as relatively calmly as they did. Imagine the disparate, I'd ask you to use your imagination. Imagine the disparate personalities of the Jewish refugees who landed in Mauritius. True, they were all Jews, but of different nationalities, different traditions, different education and culture. Only the strength of strong leadership was ever going to help them to be a community, however temporarily. And so we remember with admiration the guidance of Dr. Zegelbaum, who was the chairman and leader of the community, the father of Tali Regev, whom Owen mentioned earlier, and who was a complete figurehead of the survivors. And then we have to remember those of his team. It fascinates me to think that for those 1,600 people, there was one rabbi who had to deal with every kind of tradition and belief and faith, and yet he did it. And those who wanted to remain Jews did. And that must have been entirely due to his leadership. And the leadership of the doctors and nurses and teachers who gave the children foundations of education in the circumstances which Mr. Adler described to us. these people had a modicum of leadership which is absolutely astounding and amazing. And finally, the one person who also needs recognition, two people, the governor and his wife. The governor and Sir Callum Beer and his wife of Mauritius were involved very much with the detainees. He was an English civil servant. He probably knew nothing whatever about Jews, because that's the way Jewish life was in England then in the 1930s and 40s. And yet he and she made an enormous effort to alleviate as far as possible, without the acceptance of his bosses, the British government, far thousands of miles away. But he allowed them a modicum of comfort, not comfort so much as recognition, and to lead a life as best they could. The concept of strong communal leadership is the most important prerequisite. We know in the small communities of Africa that without good leaders in the places where we work, there would be no Jewish life at all. And so we must all remember with admiration those people who led this way to safety and survival. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. And it was, first of all, a pleasure to hear your words and your insights as well. I want to take this opportunity to thank all our participants and all our partners. Sometimes it really literally takes a village to create a program like this, especially one that wants to commemorate. So I want to thank, first of all, our partners, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center with Detainees at the head, and the Beau Bassin Jewish Detainees Memorial and Information Center in Owen Griffiths as well, and the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in South Africa. And of course, to all our speakers, thank you so much for sharing your insight and your thoughts and your understanding and helping us to commemorate Detainees, of course, and Owen Griffiths, like I mentioned, and Harris that we heard just now. Anat Blackman El Hillel, our Director of Archives at the Ghetto Fighters House, Isaac Adler with his story, and we put a link to his book, different ways that you can order his amazing book and his memories as a child on Mauritius. And of course, Ayla Talmi, and we hope your book does come out in English soon. And a special thank you, of course, to Dr. Roni Mikel Arieli, who put all our people together and helped us to create this program this evening. And I want to say, of course, thank you to our audience, to those that came to hear the story. I have to say that it's strange for me to hear that Mauritius was in the margins, because I worked with the daughter of two people that were on Mauritius, and they got married on the ship on the way to Israel. And so she was the result of that. So I really never thought of it as a marginalized story, but I'm glad that we were able to get this out. People asked if there's going to be a recording, and I put the link up for our YouTube channel. Just go to Ghetto Fighters House. Of course, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center will also be posting it, and the Beau Bassin Center will also be posting a link to a recording of the program, so you can share with those that were not able to be with us today. If you want to watch it again, some people arrived a little late because some conflict with timing, so I hope that everyone will get an opportunity to watch the program. So I want to say shalom, or as we say here, litraot, and hopefully we'll see everybody in 2 weeks for our last program of the summer on August 29th. Goodbye.